This is my spoiler-free review of Paddington in Peru. First off, who's the movie for? Almost everyone. I wouldn't recommend taking really little children to see it because there are some action sequences that they might find too exciting, but you know your kids best. There's no potty words, and the story is 400% wholesome, which is exactly what we all want from a Paddington movie. At the beginning, we see Paddington taking his passport photo, and then he shows off his fancy new passport. Paddington is now, as the film says, officially British. In case you missed my conversation with a real live British immigration judge, go check that out because he did a lot of research and figured out how Paddington would have qualified for British citizenship even though he smuggled himself and a contraband jar of marmalade into the country. Of course, it's not a proper film review if I don't find something to criticize, so I thought very hard and came up with this. At the beginning of the film, when Paddington gets his passport, one of his friends gives him an umbrella as a congratulations present, saying, "A proper British gentleman should always have an umbrella." Now, that probably works for those soft-handed toffs down in London, but I will say that up here in the Midlands, I hardly ever see people using umbrellas, and I bet if you went up to Yorkshire and offered someone an umbrella, they'd headbutt you. And rightly so. Almost all of the main actors are back, although Sally Hawkins has stepped down from playing Mrs. Brown, and the role was very capably taken over by Emily Mortimer, who delivers the best human portrayal in the movie. Ben Whishaw steps seamlessly back into the role of Britain's favorite bear, giving Paddington the perfect combination of affability, gentleness, and resilience. Mr. Brown has some jokes in his character arc that I feel like British people will get, but it might be lost on international audiences. He works for an insurance company, and he gets this new American boss who tells him to embrace the risk. And I feel like I've lived in this country long enough to safely say that embrace the risk is one of the scariest things you could ever say to a British person. The phrase risk assessment is also used in the film. And if you're not British or you don't live here, you won't get how funny that is because you have to do these risk assessment sheets for basically every event. And you have to write out literally everything that could go wrong, no matter how small, in these little boxes. And look, I get why we have to do them. Really, I get it. But I also think a lot of them are a bit over the top and kind of annoying. So when they are mentioned in the film, that did make me laugh. Although if you're American or from another country, you might not catch that joke. The visual style of Paddington in Peru is great. There are beautiful pops of red and blue in every scene, and that perfectly goes along with Paddington's coat and hat. I could really see the influence of old Looney Tunes cartoons in a lot of the scenes. There's also a fun nod to Indiana Jones, and a wonderful use of the William Tell Overture. Paddington stories are silly and fun, and Paddington in Peru, just like the two films that came before it, remembers that. The supporting cast is superb. Olivia Colman channels the same zany sense of humor that she showed in Hot Fuzz in her role as Mother Superior. But Antonio Banderas steals the show as flawed adventurer Hunter Cabot. He's always so physically invested in the roles he plays, and he can seamlessly blend comedy and drama. He gets the chance to show off his skills by playing multiple roles in this movie. I won't spoil it by saying what they are, but what I will say is that it's very difficult for an actor to have a conversation with themselves, and he absolutely pulls it off. Carla Toos is quite charming as an adventurous young boat captain with a good, kind heart, and I hope to see a lot more from her. I also bet that the marketing team for Paddington in Peru is relieved that this actor, who appears to have nothing but positivity in her social media feed, replaced Rachel Zegler just before this movie started production. One question I know a lot of you will be wondering is Paddington in Peru as good as Paddington 2? Well, no, but really, was it gonna be? Paddington 2 is one of the most perfect movies ever made. But Paddington in Peru is charming and sweet, and it is a valuable contribution to this franchise. None of the characters are terribly deep. The Brown children, now young adults, have fairly minimal roles. Mr. Brown makes a bit of progress in learning to be adventurous, and Mrs. Brown learns to deal with the fact that her babies are growing up. This movie doesn't do anything groundbreaking, but do we really want it to? Sure, the character arcs are small, but they're clean and neat and well executed. This movie is like a really, really good scoop of vanilla bean ice cream. It's gonna make you happy, It will please a crowd. It might not be that adventurous in certain respects, but it's good and it's exactly what you want sometimes. Paddington in Peru has the warm, gooey, marmalade-filled emotional center that we all hoped for. This movie deals with Paddington's two identities. He was born in Peru, but now he's British. He's a bear, but he's also a member of the Brown family. He comes to an understanding of his identity in a very sweet way that should make you cry if you have a beating heart inside you. This film resolves in a way that a lot of children these days, including my own, can relate to. Many families these days have at least one immigrant parent, and that means that children kind of have to work out the identity that comes from belonging to two places. Paddington loves his home in London, but he also is proud of having been born in Peru, and he misses his family there. My own kids feel the same way about their home here in England and their American relatives back in the US. Paddington in Peru addresses this subject with sensitivity and heart, and I think it'll mean a lot to families like mine who love where they came from and where they are now equally. When doing reviews, I give a final rating of 1 to 5 Snapes based on how well a children's book was adapted from page to screen. Snapes are my unit of measurement because Alan Rickman's portrayal of Severus Snape is a perfect example of how to take a character from a novel and bring it to life in a film. Paddington in Peru was never going to get a really high Snape score because the plot isn't based on any of the original books by Michael Bond. At the end of Paddington Marches On, the bear prepares to leave for a trip back to Peru, and Paddington at work begins with the return journey home, but that's it. Michael Bond never wrote about any of the adventures in Peru, other than to mention that Paddington had a nice time. So this film found a fun place to expand the story by imagining what might happen to Paddington when he went back on his visit. But despite the fact that this movie isn't based on a specific book, the characters and tone of the movie perfectly capture the spirit of the books, so I award 1 Snape for that. This movie also gets a bonus Snape for perfectly deploying Paddington's hard stare at a very critical moment in the story when someone has really forgotten his manners. So to my pleasant surprise, I award Paddington in Peru 2 Snapes for its loving and respectful use of Michael Bond's characters in a new story. So have you or your kids seen the movie yet? What did you think of it? Which of the characters is your favorite? And come to think of it, which of the 3 Paddington films is your favorite? Actually, all this talking about Paddington has made me hungry. I think it's time for a marmalade sandwich.